Hello and welcome to our special event today. There is neither Greek nor Jew, the heroic duo who saved an entire island from the Holocaust, honoring the late righteous among the nations, Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos from the Ionian island of Zakynthos. I'm Lauren Izzo, and it is a pleasure to have you with us for this important gathering ahead of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We're live on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and if you miss anything, you'll get a recap in your inbox. Plus, a full recording of the event will be available online at greece.combatantisemitism.org. We've come together here today to both highlight the courage of Carrere and Chrysostomos, who were miraculously able to save all 275 of Zakynthos Jews, during the Holocaust, in which more than 80% of Greek Jews perished at the hands of the Nazis, and apply the lessons of their story to the contemporary fight against anti-Semitism, which is once again on the rise worldwide. We hope a new generation of civic and religious leaders will look to Carrere and Chrysostomos as examples to emulate in confronting Jew hatred and other forms of bigotry. Today's event is being co-hosted by the Combat Antisemitism Movement, National Hellenic Society, Hellenic American Women's Council, B'nai B'rith International, and European March of the Living. And we'd also like to recognize our valued co-sponsors who made this gathering possible and share the commitment to remembering the past and building a better future. Now, before we begin, we would like to congratulate Dr. Albert Burla, who is originally from Thessaloniki and the son of Greek Holocaust survivors, for being awarded the 2022 Genesis Prize. As the chief executive officer of Pfizer, one of the first pharmaceutical companies to develop a vaccine against COVID-19, Dr. Burla has been honored with the prize nicknamed the Jewish Nobel for the company's focus and priority on reducing the severity of COVID-19 infections through its vaccine. Dr. Burla has committed to donating the $1 million prize money to projects and initiatives that preserve Holocaust memory and promote Holocaust education, with a special focus on the story of the Greek Jewish community leading up to and during the Holocaust, a truly timely and important cause. And to get us started, I am honored to introduce a respected and accomplished entrepreneur and board member of multiple colleges and cultural centers from the Hellenic American community. Drake Barakis, chair of the National Hellenic Society and esteemed co-host of this reception, passionately works with the Hellenic community, both in the U.S. and in Greece, and has a deep appreciation for the arts, especially past and present Hellenic art. Mr. Barakis, welcome.
We're honored to co-host today's virtual reception on a truly extraordinary day and during the Greek Presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. We'd like to obviously welcome you, and a special thank you to our guests, especially Her Excellency Alexandra Papadopoulou, Ambassador of the Hellenic Republic to the United States, His Excellency Chris Lazarus, Ambassador and current Chair of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, as well as our good friend, U.S. Congressman Gus Bilirakis from Florida. The National Hellenic Society promotes Hellenic ideals and values through life-changing experiences and programs. We preserve, share, and honor the legacy of inclusion, inspiration, faith, and hope for the betterment of ourselves, our society, and of course, our world. As you know, our people, culture, and traditions and dreams have shaped the world for thousands of years. It's what brings us together to fight the good fight, to rid the world of the scourge of anti-Semitism, intolerance, and ignorance. In the broadest sense of the word, to be a Phil-Hellene or a genuine Hellene is determined by what's in one's mind, heart, and action. For the tens of thousands of Jews, the first to be documented over 2,000 years ago, Greece became the gateway to Europe. Greek Jews have played an important role in the Greek history, from early Christianity through the Byzantine and Ottoman empires, and well into the 21st century. We are very pleased with the National Hellenic Society and the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement organizational partnership reflects the Hellenic-Jewish relationship and is passionate about advocating for cultural, religious, and ethnic diversity. Light shed on ignorance, hatred, bigotry, and evil overpowers the darkness that we see in opaque minds and stony hearts. We truly must rally together to continue to shine that light. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Barakis. We certainly agree and hope that your message of not only strengthening the Hellenic-Jewish relationship, but also the greater intercultural and interfaith need for cooperation resonates beyond our program today. Thank you so much. Next, I would like to welcome Dan Marashian, CEO of B'nai B'rith International, to speak about the importance of education and understanding the past for future generations to combat anti-Semitism. Mr. Marashian has worked tirelessly to promote Jewish-Hellenic relations and to support the East Mediterranean Partnership. In 2018, Marashian received the King Arius Award for Leadership in Cultural Diplomacy from the municipality of Sparta, the Greek-Israeli Cooperation Institute, and B'nai B'rith's Phi-Lon Lodge in Athens. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I want to thank the Combat Anti-Semitism movement and especially my good friend Sasha Reutman-Vratwa for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor to take part so that we can together remember the legacy of two righteous among the nations, Mayor Loukas and Bishop Chrysostomos, for the remarkable story that they present to us today at this special event. When we think about the Jewish community of Greece pre-Holocaust, we think about Athens and Volos, Yanina, Larissa, so many other communities, but especially about Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki was a city where many of the Spanish Jews fleeing the Inquisition immigrated and settled, and ultimately it would become a prominent Jewish city, so much so that by 1912, more than 50% of the city's population was Jewish. Markets were closed on Saturday. Jewish life and culture was rich and multi-layered throughout the city. In fact, B'nai B'rith, my organization, its own presence was extremely important in Thessaloniki. Our lodge was founded in 1914 there, and it had an illustrious history, including many impressive accomplishments. In one of Europe's iconic centers of Jewish life and learning, our lodge members improved Jewish life of numerous Jews and non-Jews throughout the region, as numerous wars and natural disasters occurred. B'nai B'rith has maintained a presence in Greece for over 100 years. Many Jews had emigrated from Greece before the Second World War. About 80% remained, but about 90% of Thessaloniki's Jews were deported and murdered during the Holocaust. Ultimately, 275 Jews on the island of Zakynthos survived. Bishop Chrysostomos and Mayor Loukas acted courageously to save their lives. Their deeds serve to remind us that in the midst of the horror of the Shoah, a gleam of light was still shining. That the bishop and the mayor refused to hand over the list of Jewish citizens on the island to the Germans, and that their Greek Christian neighbors did not turn over the 275 people they knew were in hiding, makes us understand that good people do exist. Today, Holocaust remembrance means so many different things. When 90% of Jewish life is wiped out in a once Jewish metropolis, when communities are lost, great yeshivot are lost, including all traces of their culture, it is difficult to find anything positive or hopeful to inspire us. But the story of these two men, who both risked their lives and ultimately saved all of the 275 Jews they protected, demands that we acknowledge that there is indeed hope in their legacy. We acknowledge and recognize that we as individuals must continue to act as they did. 77 years later, the Jews who are no longer powerless have forged great bonds between the state of Israel and the Hellenic community. Israel, American Jewry, Greece, Cyprus, together, we have built a solid alliance for the future of our common democratic good. Today, the strong relationship between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus in the areas including trade, tourism, and security represents Bishop Chrysostomos' and Mayor Carrer's greatest legacy. B'nai B'rith has worked with our Hellenic American partners, arranging missions, programs, and projects aimed at supporting the tripartite Greece, Cyprus, and Israel relationship. And just in the last few years, B'nai B'rith has organized multiple international conferences focused on security and strategic developments in the Eastern Mediterranean. We remain as invested as ever in the alliance and are reminded by the moral stance of these two men just how important it is to develop and uphold collaborative relationships. The Eastern Mediterranean is in many ways a volatile region. Acute threats to these democracies still exist. Now, more than ever, these strategic alliances are vital. In this country, the US, a nation of immigrants, the close interaction of Jews and those of Hellenic origin has made good sense. In cities across our countries, they were neighbors, they were merchants, they shared common goals for themselves and their children. Ensuring the continued solidarity of diaspora communities is of utmost importance. Again, thank you to the Combat Anti-Semitism movement for all the incredible work the organization does every single day in fighting the scourge of anti-Semitism in all its forms. Thank you for putting this extremely important meeting together. It was my honor to be with you.
And thank you, Dan, for joining us today and for imparting that powerful lesson on myself and on our viewers. Thank you so much. Now we would like to present a background historical video on the Jewish community of Zakynthos and how righteous among the nations Mayor Loukas and Metropolitan Dimitrios Chrysostomos succeeded in saving all 275 Jews on the island of Zakynthos from the Nazis and deportation to death camps. And with that, we'll open our first section of our program today to learn more about the Greek Jewish community, their history, as well as their culture, and the devastation that the Holocaust had on Greece following the Nazis' implementation of the final solution on the entire nation's Jews in 1943. Commemorating Greek Jewry and the righteous among the nations. The Jewish community of Greece is considered by historians to be one of the oldest in the world, predating the Jewish diaspora, going back more than 2,000 years. Since ancient times, the Romaniote Jewish community of Greece developed its own unique language, cultural traditions, and unique history. After the Spanish Inquisition, Greece also became home to a thriving Sephardic Jewish community centered in Thessaloniki, once known as the Jerusalem of the Balkans. Tragically, an estimated 70,000 Greek Jews, or 80% of the country's Jewish population, perished during the Holocaust. Many who survived owe their lives to the brave efforts of more than 360 Greek righteous among the nations. For our first participant to speak about the Jewish community in Greece, both past and present, as well as the sheer level of devastation that the Holocaust had on the Greek Jewish community, we welcome Dr. Leon Saltiel. As part of the Greek IHRA delegation, Dr. Saltiel is the World Jewish Congress representative to the UN and UNESCO, as well as a scholar, researcher, and award-winning author, most recently receiving the 2021 Yad Vashem International Book Prize for Holocaust Research for his latest book titled The Holocaust in Thessaloniki: Reactions to the Anti-Jewish Persecution, 1942 to 1943. It is truly a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today, Dr. Saltiel. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for your kind invitation to participate in this important program in commemoration of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, with a special focus on my native country of Greece. I would also like to thank the Combat Antisemitism movement, organizations of the Greek diaspora, international Jewish organizations, as well as an impressive list of very prominent speakers who have come together to organize this event. In my presentation, I would like to focus on the history, contribution, and modern life of the Jews of Greece. Greece is home to possibly the oldest Jewish community in the diaspora, with roots that go back to the time of Alexander the Great and the links created between Jews and Greeks at that time. These communities were small and Greek-speaking and were located both in the mainland and the islands. Ancient synagogues and written inscriptions have been found throughout the country. These communities continued their existence throughout the Roman and Byzantine empires. A significant shift happened following the Spanish Inquisition in 1492, when thousands of fleeing Jews found shelter in the Greek lands, at the time under the Ottoman Empire, and most prominently in Thessaloniki, also known as Salonika or Saloniki. These Jews were called Sephardim and kept to our days the old Castilian idiom which they were speaking, known as Ladino or Judo-Spanish. Most of them made Thessaloniki their home, creating a vibrant and flourishing Jewish community, one of the most prominent in the world. Thessaloniki was internationally known as a major center of Jewish learning. It was running according to the Jewish calendar, with everything closed on the Sabbath. No wonder why some of its names include Jerusalem of the Balkans and Mother of Israel. When the Greek army entered Thessaloniki in 1912, the Jewish community constituted the majority of the inhabitants, some 80,000 people out of a population of 150,000, a reality that marked the basic character of the city. This means that Thessaloniki was most probably the only major city in Europe with a Jewish majority. The Jews of Greece were very prominent in all spheres of public, social, and economic life, and through the European networks, they were the agents of innovation, of new ideas and economic prosperity. At that time, Greece was home to 28 Jewish communities, from north to south and east to west, numbering around 1,000 people. This long and illustrious history came to an abrupt end with the deportation and murder of the vast majority of Greek Jewry to the Treblinka and Auschwitz death camps. More than 85% of the country's Jews were murdered between 1943 and 1944. They were transported in cattle cars, some 80 people in one wagon, without any distinction between the children, the sick, the elderly, or pregnant women. Most people went directly to the gas chambers upon arrival. Today, we honor their memory and that of all the 6 million European Jews victims of hatred and anti-Semitism, who were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. Allow me to quote a Jewish mother from Thessaloniki, Sarina Saltiel, who described what was happening during the deportations in a letter to her son, who was living in Athens. The first convoy has already left. We don't know where to. The second one will leave today. On the day of departure, people go crazy. They burn their paper money, destroy their furniture with the cries of mortally wounded animals. Then, after abandoning all the fruits of their labor, they lived packed like sardines and treated worse than animals in cattle wagons. The few survivors that returned, either from the camps or from hiding or from fighting with the resistance, found hardly any family members. Their homes were robbed, the synagogues destroyed, and ancient cemeteries completely dug up. They had the difficult task to reconstruct the community and Jewish life. Today, around 5,000 Jews live in the country, organized in 8 communities: Athens, Thessaloniki, Larissa, Volos, Halkida, Ioannina, Trikala, and Corfu. The Jews of Greece are very proud and active, and they maintain synagogues and cemeteries, Jewish schools, elderly homes, Jewish museums, a summer camp, and hold several cultural events throughout the year. A Holocaust museum is currently being planned in Thessaloniki with the support of the Greek government and other governments and institutions around the world to preserve the memory of those lost, honor the legacy of those rescuers, also the ones we're honoring today, and educate the future generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saltiel, for your considerable and extensive insight into the Greek Jewish community and the impact of the Holocaust on such an important historic Jewish community in Europe. We hope that future generations will follow in taking important measures to preserve their stories and memories. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to respectfully introduce distinguished scholar, researcher, and educator, the director of the Righteous Among the Nations Department at Yad Vashem World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Jerusalem, Dr. Joel Zissenswein. Dr. Zissenswein has dedicated his life to preserving the history and facts of the Holocaust, as well as the stories of the Holocaust survivors, victims, fighters, and rescuers. He has sent us a message about the department and his work with the Righteous Among the Nations program. Take a look.
The term righteous among the nations, Chasidei Umot HaOlam in Hebrew, originates from ancient Jewish scripture. It was originally applied to non-Jews who stood by Jews at time of despair. In the modern era, post-Holocaust, the Israeli legislator added a new meaning to this term by defining a righteous among the nations as someone who rescued Jews while risking his own life. The term righteous among the nations was in use throughout the centuries. It apparently was also known to Jews throughout the Holocaust. We have indications that several Jews referred to the rescuers during the Holocaust, that is in real time, as righteous among the nations, and even pondered about possible ways of paying tribute and thanking them after the war. In internal Jewish discourse in the immediate post-Holocaust era, there are several examples of references to the righteous among the nations, that is, rescuers of Jews, as rays of light in a world of complete darkness. The young state of Israel was already preoccupied with the issue of commemorating righteous among the nations. In 1953, the Knesset, that is the Israeli parliament, passed a law titled the Yad Vashem Law. The intention of this law was to define the key and main tasks of the newly founded Central Authority for Holocaust Commemoration, that is Yad Vashem. One of its initial tasks was to commemorate the righteous among the nations and honor them. 10 years later, in 1963, the Commission for the Designation of the Righteous Among the Nations was established. Since its inception, it has always been comprised of Holocaust survivors and has always been headed by retired Israeli Supreme Court justices. In a sense, the Commission serves as a jury. Cases are brought to its review and evaluated by the members. The Commission operates in accordance with several strict rules and criteria. First, it examines the degree of risk performed by the rescuer. In addition, the Commission also requires a first-hand account submitted by the survivors themselves. In other words, it needs to review and analyze the survivor's version of the events. It's not enough to have a testimony provided by the rescuers or his descendants. The Commission requires a testimony of the survivors. In addition, it also tries to examine the motivation of the rescuers. In some cases, the rescuers carried out these acts of rescue because they wanted initially to rescue Jews. However, there are also cases when the basic motivation might have been a wish to profit from rescuing Jews, to earn some money. In some cases, we have encountered in which non-Jewish childless couples wanted to adopt a child. Since its establishment in 1963 and up to January 1st, 2021, the Commission awarded the title Righteous Among the Nations to approximately 28,000 individuals that originated from 51 countries around the world. Among these were 362 Greek nationals, both men and women, who put their own lives at risk during the years of German occupation in order to rescue Jews who were destined for deportation to Auschwitz. One of the most notable cases of rescue of Jews took place on the island of Zakynthos in the years 1943 and 1944. Following direct German occupation of the island in the fall of 1943, 275 Jewish inhabitants of the island came under direct German control. At this point, the Germans began planning their deportation. They approached the mayor, Loukas, and demanded his cooperation. The mayor declined, and after consultation and advice consulting with his associate, Metropolitan Chrysostomos, decided not to cooperate with the Germans. Ultimately, the Metropolitan handed over a list of Jews with only one name on it, his own. The attempts by the mayor and the Metropolitan enabled many of the Jews to escape to the islands, and therefore their lives were spared. This is a unique example of a case in which two officials, both a clergyman and a mayor, put their own lives at risk in order to save the Jewish population of their local region. This case stands as an example of rare courage set by the Metropolitan and the mayor. This case should be commemorated and taught and serve as a lesson for future generations. Thank you.
Dr. Joel Zissenwein, thank you so much for being with us today. Now we're going to be joined by Museum Director of Kehila Kadosha Yanina, Marsha Haddad Economopoulos, to introduce a distinguished guest of the program, Mimika Tsezana Hyman. Both Marsha and Mimika are descendants of Jewish community survivors from the island of Zakynthos. Please go ahead.
I am deeply honored to introduce Mimika Tsezana Hyman, an amazing woman whose dedication to telling the story of the saving of the Jews of Zakynthos has spanned decades. Born in Athens, Greece, the daughter of a Jewish man who survived as a teenager on the island of Zakynthos, and a woman who was born in 1942 from the Jewish community of Loukas, Mimika has grown up knowing of the dichotomy of the Holocaust experience. Hearing her mother's mother tell of the trauma of trying to hide 2 infant children from the Germans, and her father's story of how he and his family, along with the entire Jewish community of Zakynthos, was saved due to Metropolitas, Bishop Chrysostomos, and Mayor Loukas. She has spoken for almost 2 decades on the saving of the Jews of Zakynthos, often showing the excellent film Song of Life, in which her family appeared. She has spoken numerous times since 2004, and among many appearances has presented at the Greek Council in New York, the Orchid Day Foundation in Washington, D.C., and has been mentioned in the Greek National Herald. When Drake Vacarakis asked my opinion on who I felt could best speak on the story of the saving of the Jews of Zakynthos, Mimika was the first to come to mind. I could go on endlessly lauding Mimika, but the important thing is her story. Therefore, I give you Mimika Tsezana Hyman.
Marsha, and thank you to the Combat Antisemitism movement for inviting me to speak today. My name is Mimika Tsezana Hyman. As a Greek Jew, I am considered a rare specimen, as in a country with a population of approximately 11 million, there are only 5,000 Jews left. In a very humble and grateful way, I stand before you as I share with you the plain fact that neither I nor my brothers and our children would be here today if it weren't for the decision made by simple countrymen to hide their Jewish friends and neighbors about 78 years ago. My father and his family were among the 275 Jews saved by Metropolitan Chrysostomos, Mayor Carrer, and the entire population of the island of Zakynthos. You save one life, you save the world. The people of Zakynthos save the world and our hearts. Should you visit the Jewish cemetery in Zakynthos, you will find evidence that there was Jewish life in the island ever since 1281. The Jews of Zakynthos operated 2 synagogues and lived in full harmony under the Greek law with their Greek Orthodox neighbors. The island of Zakynthos was invaded by the Italians in 1941. In 1943, the Germans came to the island. By then, the people of Zakynthos had heard of the atrocities that the Germans had imposed, not only in other parts of Greece, but all around Europe. The German officer assigned to Zakynthos was called Behrens. One morning, at gunpoint, he assured Mayor Loukas that his life was in immediate danger. It would be either the list with the names of the Jewish population of the island, or next time, it would be his gun that would speak instead of his mouth. The mayor conveyed the news to Metropolitan Chrysostomos. Having made up their minds, they advised the Jews of the island overnight to hide in the villages outside the city and asked the residents of Zakynthos to protect them. That is when my grandmother, my nonna, gathered all her gold and silver jewelry, placed them in a pouch, tied it around her waist, threw a long skirt over it, and went into hiding with the family. For a year, they survived through exchanging jewelry for their daily needs. Officer Behrens the next day received the list he requested in both German and Greek. There were only two names written on it, Metropolitan Chrysostomos Dimitriou and Mayor Loukas Karer. Through further negotiations, they finally were able to save all 275 Jews, and by doing so, they breathed life into the generations that followed them. The announcement came from Germany saying the Jews of Zakynthos could remain on the island under the personal supervision of the mayor and the metropolitan. When I asked my father who hid the family during the German invasion of the island, I thought that his answer would consist of one name. Instead, my father's answer was the Sarachini family, the Roumeliotti family, the Bafaki family, the Pastras family, and the Murgos family. When I heard the second name, I was surprised. When I heard the fifth name, I was emotional. The events that we hear happen to other people never touch our feelings the same way as they do when they happen to someone so close to us. I asked my father to tell me some stories that took place during the German occupation in Zakynthos. Here are some of his stories. When the Germans would line up the men and to impose forced labor on them, the Christians would go next to the Jews, direct them to the end of the line, being hopeful that the Jews would not get a turn to work. They were trying to avoid direct contact between the Jews and the Germans. Another story is the following. While hiding in the village of Gaetani at the home of the Sarachini family, one day the German soldier came to search the houses in the village. They were looking for men to put them to work for them. The house had 4 rooms, and I happened to be in one of those rooms at that very moment, my father said. The family had a little black dog. It was interesting to see how the dog was quiet while the soldier searched the first, second, and third room, but started barking at the soldier, preventing him from entering the 4th room, in which I was trembling from fear. That dog made so much noise that drove the German soldier away. That day, my father said, that dog saved my life. Even the pets in Zakynthos protected the Jews. Another fact is the following. The sister of Metropolitan Chrysostomos, Mrs. Vasiliki Stravolemou, who also had studied in Germany and spoke German, was the director of the home economics school in the island. Among her students, there were also Jewish girls. One day, some of her Jewish students got sick and needed to be seen by a doctor. The only facility for medical attention at the time was the German military hospital. I bring to you these girls as patients, she told the German doctor, and not as Jews. We came to see you as a medical doctor who swore to practice medicine under the Greek oath of Hippocrates, and not as a German. She was able to get the medical attention for her Jewish students, and on the way out, the German doctor told her, medicine is a science and awaits patients. The war ended in 1945. The people of Zakynthos were unlucky to be hit with a massive earthquake of 6.5 Richter that leveled the entire island in 1953. At this point, I would like to mention that the first ships that came to the island with medical and humanitarian help were the ones of the Israeli Navy. Israel offers this help to the people of Zakynthos as a sign of appreciation due to the fact that they saved the Jewish community of the island during the German occupation through their bishop and mayor. When the island was being rebuilt, the Jews of Zakynthos, as an expression of their gratitude towards their saviors, paid for and donated their personal labor to replace all the windows of the St. Dionysius Cathedral. As I spent my very young summers in Zakynthos, I always felt special, happy, and interested in what the island had to offer. What I did not know then is that I was brought to the safest place on earth that a Jew could have been brought to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimika, for your powerful and moving words, not only about your family's history and their connection to Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos, but also your kind request for the world to remember the once prominent Greek Jewish community and the hope that modern-day leaders will follow in the footsteps of Zakynthos mayor and metropolitan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now joining us all the way from Zakynthos itself, we are privileged to welcome the island's Deputy Mayor, Spinos Nikitas, representing Mayor Nikitas Aretakis. Deputy Mayor Nikitas, please share with us the impact the actions of Carrere and Chrysostomos had on the island in the long term and how their story is commemorated there today.
First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation you sent to be with you today at this important event. In the late spring of 1944, SS ships sailing in the Ionian Sea in the hold of his ships, there were 2,000 Jews from Corfu and Kefalonia. After Kefalonia, they traveled to Zakynthos. Their goal was to take the Jews from here, where they would be transported to Auschwitz by train via Patras. Auschwitz and Karst place where thousands of Jews died. Shortly before the ship arrived in Zakynthos, the guard Paul Merendes informed the mayor Loukas Carrere and the Metropolitan of Zakynthos Chrysostomos that they have 24 hours to hand over the list with the names of the Jews who lived on the island with their belongings. The mayor and the Metropolitan of Zakynthos did indeed hand over this list, but in hand only two names, their own. The German guards was stunned. He immediately asked for new urgent instruction from Berlin. It was the first time something like this had happened, and he did not know how to deal with it. During the immediate time, Jews from Zakynthos were informed through scanned throughout the island to families who hosting them. These families, of course, knew the cruelty of the Germans. They knew that if they formed their guests, they would kill them and their families by example. The families of the persecuted Jews were hosted by the Zakynthia residents for several months until the Germans left Greece. In this way, 275 Jews were saved who then lived in Zakynthos. They spent their days living brotherly with the locals. Then the people were not separated by the religion and customs. They were all reconciled and worked together for their daily survival. The act of Major Loukas and Metropolitan Chrysostom, the protection of the lives of their fellow citizens with threat to their own survival. It was an act of bravery, freedom, and independence, an act in accordance with the ancient Greek value of the foreign Zeus, and at any cost to German fascism. The Zakynthia society carries a long history in terms of culture, arts, and letters. When the time comes, he defends the value of freedom and independence, even with our lives. So the act of the Major Loukas and the Metropolitan of Zakynthos, Chrysostom, not to betray their citizen with immediate danger to their lives, seems to us an act expected. Last year marked 200 years since the beginning of the Greek Revolution. Zakynthos will never living under Turkish slavery count the honor of giving much for the freedom of Greece. Many people left the island and went to fight the Peloponnese and other places for the freedom of enslaved Greece. Also, important personalities such as Dimitrios Romas and Dionysios Solomos influenced their great power of Europe. The first thought politics and the second thought art in the way that bypassed their initially negative attitude toward the beginning of the Greek Revolution. As a result, they later helped the Greek gain their freedom. It is considered that Greece would not have its current form if it were not for the contribution of the Zakynthans to the Greek Revolution. It is still believed that the Greeks had not repulsed the Turkish attack, Europe would not be the same. Appears so the contribution of Zakynthos not only the Greek Revolution, but also to the European geopolitical map. It is certain that cooperation between neighboring states such as Greece, Israel, Cyprus, and Egypt, as it is done nowadays, is essential for the security and the prosperity of these states. I would like to say goodbye to you with the image of our national poet who wrote the national anthem of Greece, listening to the Turkish canon thunder in the Mesoloniki, and also the lyrics of the famous Zakynthia poet Andreas Kalbos. Freedom requires virtue and courage. May these words and the examples of people who fought for these ideas guide the next generation in dealing with fascism and all kinds of discriminations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Nikitas, for being with us today and voicing the perspective of modern-day residents of Zakynthos on this important event that took place there. Thank you so much. Now, it is our great honor to welcome Greek Holocaust survivor, Mr. Benjamin Albalas. Originally from Athens, Mr. Albalas has truly accomplished an incredible number of achievements, previously serving as the President and General Secretary of the Jewish Community of Athens, President of the Central Board of Jewish Communities in Greece, and President of the European Council of Jewish Communities. He was also a colonel in the Greek military. Currently, he sits as the chairman of the European March of the Living and General Secretary of the Jewish Museum of Greece in Athens. Mr. Albalas, we sincerely appreciate your participation and welcome you with our whole hearts.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Athens, and I would like to thank you, all the organizers, especially the combat about this antisemitism movement. I was born in Athens in 1937. I was a hidden boy for about 4 or 5 years. And our family lived very close to the Athens synagogue. And when the war broke in Athens and Germans occupied Athens, my father has a good friend who lived in the area, who was a medical doctor, Dr. Panos Macheras. So after the news, the limited news from Thessaloniki that something was happening there, my father, with the help of Panos Macheras, approached the resistance forces in Greece, and especially the police and the church that time. And when the things became better, worse and worse, my father, and with the help of Dr. Macheras, moved the whole family from our place in Petralona, which is near to Athens Synagogue, as I said before, to a further place, farther from the previous place in Katsipodi, now known as Daphne. So he rented the house with a yard, and we moved to the whole family. That time, our family was my father, my mother, my grandmother from my father's side, my sister who was born in 1941, and myself. When we arrived in this place, we were unknown among unknowns. And we have all of us new identity cards through the help of the local police. My name was from Benjamin, or Benny, Kostas, and my family name Donos. My father was Orestis Donos, my mother Maria Donos, my grandmother Eleftheria Donos, and my sister, the young sister, Eleftheria Donos. According to instructions by my mother and my father, I was not allowed to go outside in the neighborhood to play with other children, because they feared that probably I would say my real name, not Kostas, who is a very well-known, a very common name in Greece, but Benjamin or Benny. That means probably to the Germans' ears, and that could be to a death sentence of the whole family. We stayed there in the Katsipodi or Daphne for about 20 months. Dr. Panos Macheras, with his net, brought our food with some jewelry from my mother, who sell everything. And so we have to feed ourselves and so to be very healthy. My father imitated that during the morning, left the house and went to a factory to work, because otherwise it was sometimes difficult to defend himself why he didn't work. He was my father. He was a small merchant with clothing merchant, and his friends were always in the center of Athens, near to synagogue. When we left our original place and we moved to Katsipodi, and nobody knew about that. No friends, no relatives, nobody, no neighbors knew about our new place. And it's easily understood why. We stayed there, and one of my father's main concern was not only our survivor, but also what would happen if my mother-in-law, my grandmother, passed away. He wanted to be buried according to the Jewish tradition, but who that time could be available to do that? Thanks God, my grandmother survived, and she left for Israel after 1950, visiting her daughters who were there, living there. And after this 20 months, we have to come back again to our original place and ask the people there. Anybody asked for us, and some of them say yes. Some two good-looking men came and asked, where is Albala's family? But nobody knew where the Albala's family was. I continue with my life in Pralona, and we found our home intact, no damages, nothing at all, and we started from the beginning. Then I went to the military school and the veterinary school of Thessaloniki, and I'm always from the same university and from the same veterinary school with my friend Alberto Burla, and we are very good friends now. And then when I resigned with the colonel, with the rank of colonel in 1985, then I started my own surgery, and then I was involved very much, very deeply in the community issues, as before you say, and I'm still active now as a past president. This is my life and my things during the Holocaust period. Now I am chairman of the European March of the Living, and we try to encourage all people, especially the new people, the young people, to remember Holocaust, because Holocaust was one of the most one of the unbelievable criminals of the humanity. And we try also to prevent the people to deny the Holocaust and trivialization of the Holocaust. We try hard with the help of the International March of the Living, and we hope that this year we will be able to be in person in Auschwitz-Birkenau to remember those people who perished their life in these cold places like Auschwitz-Birkenau. Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you, Mr. Albalas, for sharing with us your personal family history as well as your work at the European March of the Living in encouraging and passing on Holocaust education. Your wise words truly reach to connect the young generation of today and to the realities of the horror of the Holocaust. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Now, returning to the United States, we are pleased to welcome the Vice President of the co-hosting Hellenic American Women's Council, Dr. Ekaterini Maliou. Earning her doctorate in public health from Johns Hopkins University, Dr. Maliou currently serves as the Senior Policy Coordinator at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. Her passion for and connection with the Hellenic American community only enhances her commitment to interfaith and intercultural dialogue, as well as collaboration in order to build a supportive and fruitful world for all. Dr. Maliou, thank you and welcome.
Esteemed organizers and distinguished presenters, I'm honored to join you today and rightfully begin by extending my thanks to Mayor Loukas and Metropolitan Chrysostomos, and to the many of our resilient Greek men and women who confronted anti-Semitism, inspiring us to do the same. On behalf of the Hellenic American Women's Council, I convey my deep appreciation and admiration to all of you present today for your commitment to do your utmost to stop the world's oldest hatred. I praise the Combat Anti-Semitism movement for its inclusivity and creativity in bringing us together today, which is a model for the world to take swift action in promoting religious tolerance and standing up to those that openly express or support anti-Semitic movements, views, or commit anti-Semitic acts. The Hellenic American Women's Council is a 501c3 nonpartisan nationwide network whose mission is to identify and harness the tremendous talents of Hellenic American women. We encourage awareness of public policy issues and promote women who wish to play leadership roles in their community, the nation, and their professional fields of endeavor, including our member, Sally Berkeley, former Congresswoman, whose Greek Jewish family left Thessaloniki during the violent First Balkan War. As a Greek women's organization, we are very proud of the Greek women who played an active role in helping save Jews during the Holocaust. Righteous among the nations is Princess Alice of Greece, who rescued Rachel Cohen and her children by hiding them in her house when Germans occupied Athens and the hunt for Jews had started. There were times when the Germans became suspicious and Princess Alice was interviewed by the Gestapo. She succeeded in keeping the Cohen family alive for more than a year until Athens was liberated. She was a person with deep Greek Orthodox faith, and she would have considered it to be a totally human action to fellow human beings in distress, her son Prince Philip had said. Another righteous among the nations is Melpomene, a teenager who hid 6 members of the Mordecai family before helping them flee to Israel. Melpomene and her 2 sisters hid the family in an abandoned mosque before moving them to their own teeny home where things got too dangerous. Surviving siblings, Sarah, Yanai, and Yosimar, in a rare reunion with their 92-year-old rescuer Melpomene in 2019, said, "She saved all my family, 6 persons. You cannot imagine how dangerous it was for her, for her family, to keep us all. They saved our lives." On a personal note, as a parishioner at the St. Sophia Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Washington, D.C., I feel extra proud of our first permanent priest of St. Sophia, the righteous among the nations, Metropolitan Joachim Alexopoulos. When he left D.C. and he returned to Volos, Greece, he defiantly and courageously refused to hand over the list of Jewish residents answering, "I'm a Jew." Due to his valiant efforts, 800 of the 950 Jews living in Volos at that time were saved. His name is inscribed at the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. The Hellenic American Women's Council acknowledges the long-standing Hellenic-Jewish relations, and we express our commitment to ongoing collaborations to tackle anti-Semitism, support Jews, and all people to live in safety and with dignity. Friends, we have the knowledge, we have a responsibility, and we have the power to build a stronger world, one where people and leaders of all faiths and ideologies respect their differences and beliefs and work together to improve the human condition, but only if we build it together. So let's get to work. There is neither Greek nor Jew. Thank you.
We absolutely agree. This is the time to start working on improving the human condition and build a stronger world together across identities and countries. Thank you for your powerful words, Dr. Malliou. Your passion shines through your commitment in intergroup cooperation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Combating anti-Semitism from the past to the present. Greece has been at the forefront of combating the rise in contemporary anti-Semitism in Europe, the Eastern Mediterranean, and around the world. In 2019, Greece adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, and in 2020, prosecuted the leaders of the neo-Nazi Golden Party. In April of 2021, Greece took over the rotating presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance from Germany, with a focus on teaching and learning about the Holocaust, supplemented by the theme of combating Holocaust denial and distortion on the internet. I now invite Dr. Leon Saltiel to introduce our next honored speaker, and we welcome Robert Singer to the studio. Thank you for joining us, Robert. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Dr. Saltiel, you can take it away.
Thank you. I'm now greatly honored to introduce the keynote speaker of today's commemoration event, the president of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and head of the Greek delegation, His Excellency Ambassador Chris Lazaris. Ambassador Lazaris has served for multiple positions within the Greek diplomatic corps, such as ambassador to Egypt and Spain. His portfolio also including mandates of international cooperation, like national representative to Common Foreign and Security Policy Western Balkans Group, executive officer in NATO Operation Joint Guardian, and director for intercultural and interfaith dialogue in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Until recently, Ambassador Lazaris was also Greece's special envoy for Libya, while in 2022, he has started his new post as Greece's ambassador to Turkey, which is one of Greece's most prominent diplomatic posts. As chair of the IHRA, Ambassador Lazaris has emphasized the Greek presidency's determination to prioritize education as a primary weapon in the fight against Holocaust denial and distortion, and even as a means of self-defense for democracies against any resurgence of forces seeking to undermine and attack our common human and moral values. During his tenure as IHRA president, Ambassador Lazaris has impressed his colleagues with his eloquence, determination, and diplomatic skills. Ambassador Lazaris, I'm very honored to give you the floor.
May I underline that I am honored to be invited to this great gathering today, 2 days before the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. I would like to praise the work of the Combat Antisemitism movement, both in combating discrimination against Jews and fighting all forms of hate. Since 2010, Greek-Israeli cooperation has become multi-level and presents an ever-growing activity in so many areas as diplomacy, defense, high technology, tourism, culture, and so on. It is not by accident that Greece had welcomed, before COVID in 2019, more than 680,000 Israeli visitors. Together with a great upgrade of bilateral relations between Greece and Israel, the Greek government across the political spectrum has adopted a clear stance against anti-Semitism. The Holocaust is part of the school curriculum, and increasing numbers of Greek school classes are visiting both the Jewish Museum in Greece and in Auschwitz. Furthermore, seminars against anti-Semitism are being introduced in an increasing number of sectors with the public administration, including the police, the clergy, the armed forces, and much more. One of the reasons for this change in Greece was the rise of the neo-Nazi party Golden Dawn during the economic crisis. It should be underlined that the conviction of the neo-Nazi leaders of Golden Dawn a year ago, and landmark verdict met with jubilation internationally, is indicative of Greece's determination to defeat the politics of hate. The Greek presidency of the IHRA was an excellent moment to revitalize the domestic debate about issues like how our own society perceives antisemitism, the history of the Holocaust, how the presence of Jews would have enriched every community in our country as a whole. What is quite paradoxical is that the only place with Jewish population that had no victims was Zakynthos. The Jewish population of Zakynthos were Romaniots. Indeed, their presence in Greece dates back over 2,300 years to the times of Alexander the Great. The majority of Romaniots who survived the Holocaust left for Israel or the United States at the end of the war. However, today we have gathered together in this virtual reception to honor the then mayor of Zakynthos, Loukas, and the Metropolitan Dimitrios Chrysostomos, who not only resisted the Germans, but also mobilized the inhabitants in order to save the Jews on the mountains and provide them with food and shelter. So the mayor and the Metropolitan are not the only heroes to celebrate for this courageous action. Until the departure of the German troops, no one betrayed the hiding Jews, no one confessed to knowing where they were hiding, and as a consequence, not a single Jew out of 275 who lived in Zakynthos were deported to the concentration camps. Those people who protected the Jews risked their lives to save other lives. Without them, Zakynthos would not be the island of the just, as they call it in Israel. Realizing that their attempt to stop the deportation failed, the Metropolitan and the mayor warned the Jews on the island. Chrysostomos promised that the locals would provide them with food and shelter. What an amazing leadership they exercised. And I may add a personal note to this. A few weeks later, the Allied mission, the Eptanis, managed to arrive to liberate the island for the Germans who surrendered. And the commanding officer of the Allied expedition was my father, Captain John Lazarus. Coming back to everyday life, during the course of the pandemic, we have seen a significant rise in anti-Semitic conspiracy myths with an increase in online and offline hate speech targeting Jews in particular. The convergence of anti-vaccine advocacy and anti-Semitic views is worrying. Jews have been unjustifiably blamed for creating the virus so as to control populations or to make profit out of the development of vaccines. Moreover, pandemic measures have often been compared to policies that led to the genocide of the Jewish people, a form of Holocaust distortion that trivializes the experiences of Holocaust victims and survivors. Although the pandemic has been a permanent obstacle during its course, I'm proud to stress that our presidency has been a most empowering and enriching experience, and one may be surprised by the dynamism that this process may unfold, the intellectual mobilization of a number of sectors of our society. No doubt the debate, the media coverage, the spontaneous interest in the matters of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and distortion, the historical facts, the survivors narrating the drama they experienced, all this is just an uplifting run for every society towards fairness, historical reflection, and democracy. Another key event planned for 2022 will be an international conference entitled Holocaust and Genocides. We remember the past in order to protect the future, which will take place in the city of Kalamata in cooperation with the Holy Metropolitan Church of Messenia and the kind participation of the U.S. Embassy in Athens. One of our biggest aspirations has been to fight anti-Semitism in the digital battlefield. Some of the issues that need to be addressed include the education of users and platform moderators on the diverse manifestations of anti-Semitism, the prosecution of illegal hate speech, but also considering proactive measures against legal but harmful anti-Semitic content. Our presidency had the ambition to organize a dedicated international conference in the city of Ioannina, northwest Greece, entitled Combating Antisemitism and Holocaust Denial and Distortion on the Digital Battlefield. This must-do conference will be convened after the end of our presidency. With these comments, I wish you candidly to accomplish your goals and to see the combating anti-Semitism movement growing ever influential, acclaimed, and stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ambassador Lazarus, and for sharing this important message at a time when anti-Semitism, Holocaust trivialization, distortion, and denial are sadly on the rise around the world. Now, before we let you go, we have a small surprise to show our appreciation for the important work that you have embarked on as chair of the IHRA. I'd now like to welcome Robert Singer, CEO of the Center for Jewish Impact and senior advisor of the Combat Antisemitism Movement, to present Ambassador Lazarus with an award. Go ahead.
Ambassador Lazarus, it's an opportunity on behalf of 430 organizations that are part of network of Combat Antisemitism Movement, but also on behalf of Jewish organizations around the world and all my colleagues participating in this conference, to honor you with the special award of the Combat Antisemitism Movement. You represent a beautiful country, you represent beautiful people, and the story of Zakinos is something which is remembered by all of us. We Jews remember very well who our friends are, and especially who our friends are in very difficult times when you showed up for us. Your personal story of your father obviously shows the importance of this. I visited your country many times. I met with the Archbishop, with the Prime Minister, with the Foreign Minister, with the Mayor of Thessaloniki, and every place we came to were welcomed very, very warmly. The presidency of Greece at IHRA during the last year was outstanding. During your presidency, countries like Brazil and Cyprus joined as observers, and North Macedonia joined as a member. And many important actions took place, especially like you told us at the beginning of your presidency, in the field of education and Holocaust education. And the fact that the person that presented you, Dr. Leon Saltiel, wrote a number of papers and books on this issue just speaks for itself. So please receive this award and know that people in Israel, Jewish people around the world, appreciate very much the history of Jews in Greece, the acts that were taken by the Greek community during the war, a very exemplary legislation that took place a few years ago with the Golden Dawn, and the position and stance of Israel and beside Jewish people. So thank you very much for everything that you did. And on behalf of the Combat Antisemitism Movement, I wish you a great success as an ambassador of Greece in Turkey.
Thank you very much for joining me in the studio today. And thank you, Ambassador Lazarus, so much for being a part of our broadcast today. The storied history of the Hellenic-Jewish relations goes back millennia to the era of Alexander the Great. And in recent years, Greece has become one of the states Israel is closest with the two nations joined by Cyprus forming a strategic neighborly partnership in the Eastern Mediterranean region with U.S. backing. And as we heard from Ambassador Lazarus previously, Greece has also taken on a leading role in the global fight against the age-old scourge of Jew hatred. Now we have the special honor of hearing from the Secretary General for Greeks Abroad and Public Diplomacy for the Hellenic Republic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Professor John Chrysostomos, for his perspective on Hellenic-Jewish relations. Professor Chrysostomos has taught at academic institutions in Greece as well as abroad and was elected Vice President of the International Association of Schools and Institutes of Administration and appointed President of Greece's National Center for Public Administration and Local Government. Professor Chrysostomos has worked in many European countries and in the United States, collaborating with local community organizations, committees, and councils in Greece and beyond. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Esteemed dignitaries, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, Ουκ ουδέος ουδέλην. There is neither Greek nor Jew. So St. Paul the Apostle. We are all one under Jesus Christ. This is a foundational tenet of the Greek Christian Orthodox religion, and it was put into the test during World War II. A plethora of Christian Greek believers transubstantiated this into the most noble action, that of saving one or more human lives who were in mortal danger. In this instance, Jewish Greek lives, and at the same time putting themselves in harm's way. There is no way to repay such a deed. This manifestation of morality, altruism, and proactive humanity is exceptional. It distinguishes the righteous. Each rescue story is unique and particular. However, the unselfish goal is the same: to save at least one life, precious for all mankind. In 2016, the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs published a volume titled Greek Righteous Among the Nations. This in recognition of the importance and contributions of Jewish Greeks to the society at large. It is also an active manifestation of the diachronic Hellenic-Jewish relationship. The Hellenic-Jewish relationship has been flourished in all levels, ranging from diplomacy and tourism to technology and culture, especially over the last 2 years. And it is this relationship that distinguished speakers of this final section will further highlight. Today, we honor Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos. In them, we honor all the Christian Greek righteous. Let their action be a shining beacon of moral values. Their feats, their stories should serve as guiding paradigms and ethical principles of our youth. This would be their coveted posthumous acknowledgement. We are internally indebted to them. We'll never forget them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Chrysostomos, for sharing that inspiring message, both between Greece and Israel and among the Hellenic and Jewish diasporas. We look forward to strengthening these important relationships, so thank you. We would now like to extend our sincere gratitude to Congressman Gus Bilirakis, representing Florida's 12th Congressional District, for joining us today. First elected to Congress in 2006, Representative Bilirakis serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee, is the ranking member of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee, and is a member of the Health Subcommittee and Communications and Technology Subcommittee. The congressman is a champion of Hellenic alliances and issues, serving as co-chair of the Hellenic-Israel Alliance and co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Hellenic Issues. We are so fortunate to have such an effective lawmaker join us for this commemoration and celebration. Welcome.
It's my pleasure to join you today in this celebration of the Hellenic-Jewish relations. I'm particularly proud that you're highlighting the significant ties between the Hellenic and Jewish peoples. Perhaps the greatest example of this special connection is symbolized by the work of Mayor Loukas of Zakynthos and Bishop Chrysostomos during the Holocaust. Their inspiring story, again, is a proud moment in our Hellenic heritage. As the grandson of Greek immigrants, I'm proud to be one of nearly 2 million Americans who are fortunate enough to be able to claim Greek ancestry. As the birthplace of democracy, Greece's long and rich heritage has greatly influenced Western philosophy and democratic political systems around the globe, including ours. For 2 centuries, the modern Greek state has promoted liberty, peace, and human rights, and more recently played a critical role as an ally of the United States and a steadfast NATO partner. Israel is, of course, one of the United States' most important and strategic allies, serving on the front lines in our joint battle against terrorism and weapons proliferation. Since 1948, Israel has not only survived, under the most horrific circumstances, but flourished to become the only prosperous, democratically elected nation in the Middle East. Co-chairs of the Congressional Hellenic-Israel Alliance Caucus, called CHIA. I have worked to nourish the special bond between the United States, Greece, and Israel, as well as Cyprus, celebrating the boundless spirit of the Hellenic and Jewish communities all over the world. I'm thrilled to see the relationship between the United States, Greece, and Israel and Cyprus continue to thrive. Since 2013, we have been working through CHIA to highlight for other lawmakers how Greece and Israel's strategic location, natural resources, and intellectual capital create a natural partnership to address economic, energy, and counterterrorism issues in the Middle East and Europe. We emphasize how the relationship between these countries and the United States are critical to maintaining economic stability and national security. Hate and hate groups have no place in our society. The fact that anti-Semitic attacks are on the rise in the United States, a nation founded on the principles of freedom, liberty, and justice, is alarming and wholly unacceptable. Our darkest moments as a human race have come during times when those who knew better stood silently, making excuses of passivity and allowing injustice and persecution to reign. Therefore, each and every time I encounter an anti-Semitic rhetoric or behavior, I confront the ignorance. I'm also proud of my recent legislative victory. The U.S.-Greece Defense and Interparliamentary Partnership Act was just signed into law. I'm very proud of that. I worked with, Representative Deutsch on this particular issue in the House, and Senator Menendez and Senator Rubio. And again, what it will do, it will strengthen the defense partnership between the United States and Greece, and of course Cyprus, including support for Greek military modernization and multilateral security efforts, again, between Cyprus, Greece, Israel, and of course the United States of America. This critical legislation bolsters Greece's efforts to modernize its armed forces, while strengthening our strategic partnership among our Hellenic partners. It also enables continued security cooperation to help facilitate enduring stability throughout the region. During these turbulent times around the globe, I encourage my colleagues to take an important lesson from the story of Mayor Loukas of Zakynthos and Bishop Chrysostomos being willing to take his stand to protect the life and liberty of those who are being oppressed and persecuted is always the right decision, and I know you know that. Throughout history, humanity has encountered many faces of evil, unfortunately. Our brightest moments as an international community have been those in which we present a united front in our efforts to identify and eradicate its presence. We must all take responsibility, in my opinion, for being a part of that effort. And America must always remain a beacon of principled courage, recognizing and promoting the basic human rights of all people around the globe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman Bilirakis, for your poignant remarks on issues facing the Hellenic community in the United States and the moral obligation for people of good character to stand firm against anti-Semitism. We are pleased you were able to help honor these Greek righteous among the nation's heroes and wish you much success in your bipartisan efforts on Capitol Hill. Thanks for being with us. Now, at this time, I would like to extend our respected appreciation to Her Excellency Alexandra Papadopoulou, Ambassador of the Hellenic Republic to the United States of America, for joining us today. Her Excellency has served in many different positions in the Hellenic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including as the head of the Hellenic UN Affairs Desk, permanent representative of Greece to the European Union, ambassador of Greece to Uruguay and Paraguay, and head of the European Union Rule of Law Mission in Kosovo. With Your Excellency's extensive experience in the world of diplomatic relations for the Hellenic Republic, we sincerely thank you for joining us today.
First, please allow me to give my congratulations to the Greek American and Jewish organizations that have come together to mark the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, to remember those who perished and honor those who took a stance against evil. Commemorating this day is more than a moral obligation. It is also a reminder to ourselves and the world that we should never allow nor tolerate that evil repeats itself. As we have witnessed recently, a worrisome trend of anti-Semitism in the form of violent and other attacks with actual victims has become increasingly real. Consequently, we do not have the luxury of standing silently by. The event today focuses on two special individuals, Dimitrios Chrysostomos, the Metropolitan of Zakynthos, and Loukas, the Mayor of Zakynthos. As we remember them for their compassion and bravery, we honor them so that their example will be remembered and emulated. We honor them to remind ourselves and the world that heroism really is, really exists, and to emphasize that individual acts do make a difference. Along with them, we must also remember and honor all the people of Zakynthos at the time, who despite their differences, political or otherwise, all worked together and in full agreement saved their Jewish brethren. On such occasions, it's also imperative that we hold ourselves accountable and ask ourselves, what would we have done if we had stood in their shoes? What are we doing today to fight anti-Semitism, bigotry, and racism? As we honor such noble acts, it is just as important that we do not forget the atrocities themselves. Keeping the memories of the Holocaust and World War II alive is our best protection against history repeating itself. The Nazi occupation is one of the greatest tragedies that had befallen modern Greece. This we must never forget. But memory is fickle. It fades as time passes and as we go about our lives. Thus, preserving this history rests with us today. It is our responsibility to inform future generations about the horrors of anti-Semitism, racism, and bigotry, because we know that those who fail to read history risk repeating it. As the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, stated in his speech on the occasion of Greece taking over the rotating presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in March 2021, to educate on events past is the responsibility of the present. The Prime Minister emphasized the critical role of education in preserving memory, and by education, he meant more than just teaching the Holocaust at schools. He stressed that this education must include also a broad spectrum of activities. The story of the Holocaust must come alive in museums. People must be sensitized through research, publications, and through the media. This past year, Greece celebrated the bicentennial of the Greek War of Independence. We were reminded that the country was built on humanitarian values, on freedom and on democracy. Combating anti-Semitism, bigotry, and racism naturally flows from these values. Greece has taken concrete steps to live up to this historic responsibility and to raise awareness. It had adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and was the first country to adopt the working definition of Holocaust denial and distortion. It is also building a museum where the story of the Holocaust will come alive. The National Holocaust Museum of Greece will be operational by 2025 in Thessaloniki, where the Jewish community flourished for centuries and suffered the greatest loss under the Nazis. We're also proud to have secured from the return from Russia, after years of effort and negotiations, the archives of the Greek Jewish communities that have been held there since the 1940s. stolen by the Nazis in 1942 and eventually moved to Moscow after the Soviet army captured Berlin, these archives shed light on the historic trajectory of the Jews in Greece and include archives, books, and objects of worship from more than 30 synagogues. All these will contribute greatly to the education of future generations about the richness of Jewish life in Greece, its contributions to Thessaloniki and to Greece at large, and will bear testament to the destruction and tragedy of the Holocaust. Finally, as the day calls, let us all look inwards again to ask ourselves whether we, like Metropolitan Chrysostomos and Mayor Loukas Carrera, would have risen to the occasion then, and what are we doing or we can do today in the face of bigotry, anti-Semitism, and racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your insightful words about the importance of the Hellenic-American diplomatic relationship, as well as the international obligation to take a collective stance against anti-Semitism and all forms of prejudice and hatred. We are sincerely grateful that you were able to participate and honor Loukas Carrera and Dimitrios Chrysostomos with us. Thank you. Now we'd like to welcome another very special guest, Mayor Moses Elisaf, the mayor of Ioannina, Greece. Mayor Elisaf is also a pathologist and professor of internal medicine. He served as mayor of Ioannina since September 2019, when he became the first Jewish mayor in Greece's history. The son of Holocaust survivors, he has served as the president of the Romaniote Jewish community of Ioannina and previously as the president of the Central Board of Jewish Communities in Greece. Last year, Mayor Elisaf spoke alongside the mayors of Athens and Thessaloniki at CAM's inaugural Mayors Summit against anti-Semitism. Mayor Elisaf, it is a pleasure to have you joining us today again.
Thank you for your kind invitation. I have first to introduce myself. At the moment, I'm emeritus professor of internal medicine in the University of Ioannina Medical School, but also, as you previously mentioned, had the honor to be the president of the tiny, though historical Jewish community of Ioannina for the last 20 years, but also more than 2 years, the mayor of the city of Ioannina, and thus I had a strong commitment to preserve the memory of the city and to make known its rich multicultural past. I have to mention that Ioannina for many centuries was the capital, the leading Jewish center of the so-called Romaniote Jewry, in other words, the center of the Greek-speaking Jews whose roots go all the way back to the Hellenistic period. Even though the Byzantine era was a difficult time for the Jewish population of Ioannina due to administrative changes in attitudes toward Jews, they were treated reasonably under Ottoman rule, since they were allowed freedom of religious observance, were given special privileges in trade and work, and were allowed autonomy with their own communities. At the beginning of the 20th century, approximately 5,000 Jews, 20% of the total population, lived in Ioannina. The first decade of the 20th century, many Jews of Ioannina left the city and moved to Athens or migrated to the United States and Israel, where founded the Keilah Kedusha Ioannina in New York, but also the Beit Abraham and Ohel Sarah synagogue in the Machaneh Yehuda neighborhood in Jerusalem. Most of the Jews of Ioannina were traditional. The city had 2 synagogues, the Kal Kadosh Yasan, which exists to these days, but also the Kal Kadosh Hassan, which destroyed during the German occupation and then demolished. Jews of Ioannina used Greek as their everyday language of communication from the moment they settled. They were inspired by their local culture and customs and were versatile enough to blend them with their own to create the unique Greek Jewish tradition. Their distinct language was Judeo-Greek, a Greek dialect that contained Hebrew along with some Aramaic and Turkish words. The most notable differences between Roman Youth and Sephardi were the language they used, as well as the dress, food, and form of religious observance. As previously mentioned, the community was well incorporated in the city life through many centuries, and especially after the city liberation from the Ottoman Empire in 1913, though several anti-Jewish riots broke out in the city in the late 19th century on the occasion of Orthodox Easter under pretext of accusation of ritualistic crimes, as well as before Second World II, mainly due to economic conflicts enforced by the surrounding anti-Semitic climate. Ioannina became part of the Greek state after the successful ending of the Balkan Wars. The Jews of Ioannina played and still play an active role in the social and political life of the local society. They were on good terms with their Christian fellow citizens. Yosef Elia, the poet and intellectual of Jewish descent of his time, was a true child of the socio-political changes which marked the first decades of the 20th century and made his name as the ideal representative of the interaction between Greek civilization and Jewish tradition. When the Axis forces gained control in Greece in 1941, Ioannina came under Italian administration, which took no measures against the Jews. In July 1943, the German division arrived at the city and immediately exerted pressure on the Jewish population. A few people, mainly young men, took to the mountains and joined resistance groups. On 25 of March 1944, the remaining 1,870 Romanian Jews were taken through the snow in 97 covered trucks via Tricala to Larissa, and from there they were carried onto trains and transported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. 92% of the Romanian Jews of Ioannina were exterminated in the Nazi camps. Finally, I have to discuss about the present time. As previously mentioned, Ioannina has always been multicultural, multilingual, and multi-religious city with Christian, Islamic, and Jewish influences defining its identity. The presence today of Islamic monuments and the Jewish synagogue among the many Christian churches is an internal proof of the multicultural history and tradition of Ioannina throughout the passage of time. The citizens of Ioannina, with my election, have shown they condemn the hate that is born from intolerance and anti-Semitism and appreciate the value of a person regardless of his religious belief. As mayor of Ioannina, I have to accomplish a mission: to serve all my citizens and act at their best interests. I will strive in every day to be worthy for their confidence and to fulfill my duties the best I can. From this point of view, I have to mention that since the present educational event is dedicated to the memory of two amazing personalities, of two real leaders of the Zakynthos during German occupation, who displayed incomparable courage and heroism, and thus managed to save the Jews of the island, and are included in the rights among the nations, I have to focus on the catalytic role of the mayor of the island, Loukas, who is an enlightened example for all mayors and leaders around the world, especially these difficult times, whose paradigm underlines our duty to fight against any expression of hate, discrimination of any kind, xenophobia, political or religious intolerance, and anti-Semitism. From this point of view, I have to mention our municipality's significant role in the handling of the refugee problem in our area. From the very beginning of the humanitarian crisis in Greece, Ioannina has successfully hosted without problems in camps and the urban setting a significant number of refugees and asylum seekers. Currently, it hosts more than 2,500 refugees and asylum seekers, and we have strived every effort to efficiently take care of them with the most appropriate ways, so as our city has been awarded by international organizations as a good example in the confrontation of this complicated problem, which tests the resistances of our societies. Thus, even today, Loukas' career paradigm points out our humanitarian duties and the way of the diversity, justice, freedom, and unselfishness. Since my life was indelibly marked by the loss of dozens of close relatives, including my grandfathers and my grandmothers, in all my life, I fight against fatal oblivion and silence, as well as against fascism, racism, intolerance, and anti-Semitism. I strongly believe, but rephrasing Jean-Paul Sartre's statement, that the stranger is not our hell, but the human fellow being standing next to us, our comrade in arms, in our common effort for a better future. Thank you for the invitation and for your patience.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for sharing these moving insights and speaking on the importance of strong Hellenic-Jewish relations in Greece and the legacy of the righteous in Greece today. We really look forward to continuing to collaborate on initiatives to combat anti-Semitism on the municipal level. Thank you again. Now joining us again is Kehila Kadosha Yanina, Museum Director, Marcia Haddad Economopoulos. Currently based in New York as an author, translator, editor, and lecturer, as well as a descendant of the Zakynthos Jewish community. Marcia has dedicated her life's work to preserving the unique history and diverse cultural traditions of the Greek Jewish community. Despite the utter destruction that the Holocaust caused on the Jews of Greece, Marcia and the Kehila Kadosha Yanina Museum preserve their stories as well as their memory. Please join me in welcoming Marcia.
Thank you very much. Correction, my family was not from Zakynthos, but from Saloniki.
My apologies.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Alexandra Papadopoulou, Your Excellency, Ambassador Chris Lazarus, Congressman Gus Belarakis, honored guests and speakers, and the thousands who are watching us around the world. I am humbled to take part in this program. I would like to thank all those who are participating in the event and all those that were involved in the planning, especially my dear friend Art Demopoulos, the Executive Director of the National Hellenic Society, and Drake Barakis, the National Hellenic Society Chairman. I am honored to be representing Kehila Kadosha Yanina Synagogue and Museum today. I'm also overjoyed that so many in the program can actually pronounce my surname. I have dedicated my life to telling the story of the Jews of Greece and their losses during the Holocaust, often called the orphan child of Holocaust studies. The story of the saving of the Jews of Zakynthos has stood out as a beacon of hope in the vast sea of destruction. This story is so important because it puts to test the oft-quoted excuse, there was nothing we could do. Too often the story of the Holocaust is highlighted by the losses. But if we are going to learn anything from the horrors of that period, it should be through telling the story of those who had the moral courage to risk their lives and save Jews. Many feel that their actions, whether it be in voting or taking a stand on an important issue, will be meaningless. The courage of Mayor Loukas and Mitropolitis Chrysostomos shows us that we can all make a difference. When people hear of the number 87% as the figure given for Greek Jewish losses in the Holocaust, the largest percentage of any officially occupied country, they immediately jump to the conclusion that these losses were due to Greek anti-Semitism. We at Kehila Kadosha Yanina like to tell the visitors of the stories of those who risked their lives saving members of our own community, those who would not have survived to create children and enjoy grandchildren. if it was not for the moral courage of their Greek Christian neighbors. Yes, there was anti-Semitism, but there was also moral courage. As I look over the list of guest speakers, especially those whose lives have been irrevocably changed because of the Holocaust, I am forever mindful of what we, as Greek Jews, lost, and in addition, what the world lost. While my personal story is different, my life has been shaped by the losses in Greece. I am here today because my grandfather, Ezra Herrera of blessed memory, made the decision to leave Thessaloniki in 1919 after the fire of 1917, being left homeless with young children and a pregnant wife. He was the youngest of 11 children. His siblings, their spouses, their children, and grandchildren all perished in the Holocaust. My life was altered by a promise I made to my Nona Marika that I would find out what happened to our family. Thus began my personal odyssey in 1973, and like Konstantinos Kavafi, I learned that it was not so much the goal, but rather the journey that would change my life. Each of today's speakers who are here commemorating Greek Jewry have lived their own personal odyssey, coming to terms with the losses in Greece and trying to enrich their lives and that of others through their work and studies. We have all had our dark moments as we ponder the whys and the hows, but each of us in our own way have tried to vanquish hatred and anti-Semitism, hopefully creating a better world. Whether we are here today because of a choice our ancestor made, or because of the actions of righteous Christians who had the moral courage to risk their own lives to save us, or their parents or grandparents who had lived their lives in gratitude to those who enabled us to be alive and with a conscious mission to remember those who were not as fortunate. Personally knowing Dr. Leon Sofiel, Benjamin Albala, Dr. Moses Eliasaf, and Mimika Chizana Chaim, it is indeed my honor to stand virtually alongside these outstanding individuals. I wish to live to see the day that I no longer have to hear, "You mean there were Jews in Greece?" I never knew Greece was affected by the Holocaust. And my favorite, when people find out that I'm a Greek Jew, was one of your parents Greek and the other Jewish? Or did you convert? Hopefully through our work, we can eradicate ignorance along with hatred and anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work, Marcia, especially in honoring Righteous Among the Nations with the Kehila Kadosha Yanina Museum's very own Moral Courage Award, and your commitment to actively remembering the incredible acts of the many Righteous Among the Nations, men and women around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
In recent years, ties between Greece and Israel have flourished, developing into an extremely close alliance rooted in common strategic interests in the Eastern Mediterranean region. We now have with us Deputy Chief of Mission at the Israeli Embassy in Greece, Zach Saar, to talk about these relations and their history, as well as the relevance of the story of Righteous Among the Nations heroes Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos to the modern-day fight against anti-Semitism.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, honored speakers, I would like to start by saying thank you to the Greek Presidency of IHRA and the Combat Anti-Semitism movement for organizing this online event. I'm truly honored to address this reception, paying homage to the heroism of Mayor Loukas and Metropolitan Chrysostomos and to the emerging alliance between Israel and Greece. At a time of the great devastation of the Jewish community of Greece, which lost 86% of its population during the Shoah, those brave souls who risked their lives to save their Jewish compatriots shined like beacons of light and hope in a period of a great darkness. The story of Mayor Carrer and Metropolitan Chrysostomos is one of many in Greece. 362 Greek writers among the nations have been honored by Yad Vashem thus far. Other well-known Greek writers figures include the late Archbishop of Greece during the Nazi occupation, Damaskinos, the chief of police in German-occupied Greece, Angelos Evert, the late Metropolitan of Dimitrios, Joachim, Leila Karyani, the legendary woman of the Greek resistance during World War II, as well as many other heroes of World War II. Commemorating the heroism of the righteous among the nations is even more relevant today as anti-Semitism is experiencing a resurgence around the world, particularly in Europe. Attacks against Jews and anti-Jewish hate-mongering have become commonplace in many major European cities. Also here, in Greece, anti-Semitism has been mostly expressed through the desecration of Jewish sites and anti-Jewish conspiracy theories in part of the media and internet. In recent years, the condemnation of such phenomena, both by Greek officials and the Greek public, have been much more prominent. The Holocaust Remembrance events taking place in Athens and Thessaloniki and in other parts of Greece every year. The Greek Presidency of IHRA, the government's decision to build the Holocaust Museum in Thessaloniki are all examples of its steadfast commitment to combat anti-Semitism. Educational initiatives like those of the Jewish Museum of Greece sending Greek educators to Yad Vashem to train them on how to teach the Holocaust, the Yad Vashem Award events organized by the Israeli Embassy with Greek high schools in cooperation with the Greek Education Ministry to tell the stories of the righteous among the nations are important in passing the message to the young generations to learn from the past and understand the need for constant vigilance in combating extremism. The story of Loukas and Metropolitan Chrysostomos and those of all the writers are part of our common history. Jews and Christians, Israelis and Greeks, tying us together in a deep bond of friendship and solidarity. In recent years, Israel and Greece have deepened their friendship. A strategic partnership, an emerging alliance has been built encompassing cooperation in a wide range of fields like political exchanges, defense, the economy, tourism, health, and culture, not to mention the trilateral cooperation scheme between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. The recent 8th summit in December of Israel, Greece, Cyprus, with the participation of Israeli and Greek Prime Ministers Naftali Bennett and Kyriakos Mitsotakis, as well as Cypriot President Nikos Anastasiades, served to reconfirm the importance of the Greek-Israeli relations on bilateral and trilateral level, dealing with a vast array of fields including energy, security, climate change, and combating the pandemic. Cultural affinity between Greece and Israel is simply extraordinary. There's a reason why Israeli tourists flock to Greece every year. They feel at home here. Prior to the pandemic, close to 700,000 tourists visited Greece every year. Israel and Greece have also had ample opportunities to display their solidarity to each other. Examples of this solidarity were the Israeli firefighters who came to the aid of Greece during the summer's forest fires, while Greek firefighting pilots have played a major role in extinguishing major fires in Haifa in 2016. Greek-Israeli relations are not limited to bilateral and trilateral contacts, but are also taking on a regional dimension. The Abraham Accords, signed more than a year ago, have been strategic game changer for Israel and other countries in the region, paving the way for a close relationship between Jerusalem and some of the Gulf countries, with a great dynamic from both sides. Greece maintains good ties with many of the same countries with which Israel is normalizing relations, creating more room for wider cooperation schemes. Thus, Greece and Israel can work together not only to promote mutual interests, but to enhance regional security, stability, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, today, as friends and allies, Israel and Greece can look back on the heroism of Mayor Loukas and Bishop Chrysostomos as part of their common history, while using their story and the stories of all the writers as a tool of remembrance and education to combat anti-Semitism.
Very much, Deputy Chief of Mission Sa'ar, for sharing with us these insights on the relationship between Israel and Greece and its strategic importance. Now, before I continue, I'd like to welcome Catherine Schkapp to the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be speaking with you very shortly.
Thank you, Lauren.
So don't go anywhere, of course. Now, we are pleased to welcome Craig Dershowitz, Executive Director of Artists for Israel. Craig is a heavily tattooed, heavily opinionated, heavily commended, Brooklyn-born, Los Angeles-based radical thinker who fuses humanitarian projects with advocacy work. The organization he founded has amassed an international network of agents of change artists who place art over hate. Their creativity and talents help to beautify society, uplift people, and enhance our understanding of the Jewish people, the Holocaust, and Israel. We welcome Craig to share about a global mural campaign he launched in Portugal last year and his plans for a mural in Greece. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And you need to send me that bio. I love that.
Will do.
That was amazing. It's truly, excuse me, my honor to be here today amongst this distinguished group of thinkers, speakers, diplomats, activists. As you mentioned, representing Artists for Israel, I've had the good fortune to work with creatives from 32 different countries. And I've learned from them the things that bring us together far outnumber the things that divide us. I'm always humbled when I walk into a foreign country and I learn the unique ways that their specific cultural heritage informs their art. Like I did in Portugal, in Indonesia, in London, and we'll be doing soon in Greece. But even with all the nuance and distinction, the act of making, of creating is universal. In Greece, an artist by the name of Cleomenes will be painting an example or a mural of these two heroic men. His art borrows from graffiti, the representational street art, and the classics all at once. It is European and hints of American muralism as well. Yet it's his own. He takes influences and creates something brand new, creates a new history. And I can't think of anyone to better represent this program and to glorify the men who, using their ethical, moral, and religious duty, took the very brave and quite unusual action to defy the Nazis. Our program, Righteous Among the Nations, is painting murals of these heroes around their world in their home countries with their home artists. For too long, we have talked about the horrors of the Holocaust. And of course, there is no end to that and no end for people to be reminded. But we also want people to think about those who stood up, the heroes, and create a model so that people in their country, like in Greece, we can look at those who helped. We can look at those who do good and say that, no, it's not all bad. There is a pathway. There is a role model so that when things start looking this way again, we know who to look at and how we too should model our actions and behave. Artists for Israel prevents the spread of anti-Semitism and helps heal communities affected by hate. And in order for us to be successful, we need a world of artists like Cleomenes, a world of heroes like those we honor today, and a world of people coming together recognizing their achievements, like those who are speaking with us. We did our first mural in Portugal. It was an incredible success. It's actually become the site of tour buses. It's become a site of political stump speeches. And it has become a site that more than 5 million people on social media have seen because of the way it's passed and presented. There is a need, a dire need for Holocaust education in museums and textbooks. But also in this day and age, we must bring it to the streets. We must put it in front of people's faces and make sure that they too see and learn. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. And it is so incredible to hear about a new approach to Holocaust education, which focuses on amplifying the narratives of righteous among the nation's heroes through public art displays. Thank you, Craig, for empowering street artists to use their talents and influence to deliver bold and highly visible messages against anti-Semitism, and educate audiences about the Holocaust. We look forward to seeing the completed mural in Greece, of course, and hope you will continue to create an impact around the world through art, which sends positive messages of hope and courage. And I will surely send you that bio after this broadcast.
Appreciate it.
We now turn to the artist who will be designing and painting the mural, Cleomenes Kostopoulos, the creative director at Art in Progress, for a few words about his work.
Hi. Hello, I'm glad to meet you all. My name is Cleomenes Kostopoulos and I am a visual artist, artistic director at the International Street Art Festival of Patras and creative director at the Art in Progress. I would like to thank you all and especially Greg, who honored me by inviting me in this important project. Murals are one of the most important forms of contemporary expression and communication in public space. It is one of the most democratic forms of art, since it is entrusted to all citizens without exceptions. It's a great challenge and responsibility for me, the fact that I am given the opportunity to visualize the heroic acts of the Metropolitan of Zakynthos Chrysostomos Dimitriou and the Mayor of Zakynthos Loukas. Today, more than ever, we must revisit our history here in Greece. Personalities like these give us strength and inspiration for the future. I hope that my work will be worthy of this heroic act, and I hope that for several years it will lend to passers-by a little of remembrance of the soul and spirit of these heroes. Thank you warmly.
Thank you, Kleomenis, for your input on the plan for the mural and your work as an artist and art in progress. We look forward to seeing the mural in honor of Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos in Greece soon. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I would like to invite a representative from the organizers of this event, the Partnerships and Diplomatic Outreach Coordinator of the Combat Antisemitism Movement, Catherine Schkupp. Thank you again for joining me in studio. She will provide some concluding thoughts after hearing from some incredible speakers today. Catherine, please.
Thank you, Lauren, so much for that wonderful introduction. So on behalf of the Combat Antisemitism Movement, we would like to thank all of our speakers and our viewing audience for joining us today for this digital event in honor of Righteous Among the Nations, Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos ahead of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Anti-Semitism did not end with the Holocaust. Even after the Nazis and their collaborators starved, tortured, gassed, and murdered 6 million Jewish lives, each with their own families and dreams, anti-Semitism continues to thrive and threatens to destroy our societies by allowing a virulent hatred to fester without a strong enough response. With the near constant verbal as well as physical threats against Jewish communities around the world and online, with Colleyville freshly in our minds, we need new types of heroes in the modern day to take active steps in preventing anti-Semitism online, as well as at the local, regional, national, and international levels. Following in the brave example of Mayor Carrer and Metropolitan Chrysostomos, we urge citizens like you and leaders around the world to stand up against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. We invite everyone watching today to visit our website, combatantisemitism.org, and join the movement to combat Jew hatred. The time is now to stop anti-Semitism.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for those thoughtful and inspiring words for our viewing audience around the world and the need to build a better future together. Now, with that, we have come to the conclusion of our event today. We hope you come away inspired by the courage of Greek righteous among the nations, Loukas and Dimitrios Chrysostomos, and reinvigorated to stand up against contemporary manifestations of anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry. Today's gathering was co-hosted by the Combat Antisemitism Movement, National Hellenic Society, Hellenic American Women's Council, B'nai B'rith International, and European March of the Living. We also thank all of our co-sponsors for their support that enabled this important event to be the success it was. Now, if you missed any part of the broadcast or would like to revisit it in the future, don't worry, you'll receive an email with the full recording, which will also be available at greece.combatantisemitism.org, as well as the Combat Antisemitism Movement's social media channels. Wherever you are, know that you can make a difference in fighting anti-Semitism and building a better world. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. I'm Lauren Izzo. Goodbye for now.